Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Thursday, November 21st, 2024. I've been doing a daily countdown of my 366 favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and coming in at number 41 is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. November has been fairly Zelda heavy on the channel here. Majora's Mask just barely didn't make it in, being my 63rd favorite game, which lands on October 30th. But this is my third Zelda title in the month of November. When I ranked Twilight Princess as my 58th favorite game, I talked about how I think it may objectively be the best Zelda game, but it's not my favorite. Then literally the next day, I covered Breath of the Wild as my 57th favorite game and said that it's neither the best Zelda game or my favorite Zelda game, but that it ranked higher than Twilight Princess because of all of the things that I consider to be non-Zelda parts to it, if that makes sense. Well, after teasing it for a couple weeks now, I'm finally here to talk about my favorite Zelda game. This is the highest ranked one, so here you go. Ocarina of Time is an absolute classic and brought the long-standing franchise to the world of the third dimension, making the most of the power of the N64 at that time. In fact, it's my absolute favorite game on the platform, and one of the very few games that I think are truly designed with that bizarre controller in mind. I'm recording it on my Switch, and for the only really the third time this year, I found myself wishing I had the fancy N64 controller that's compatible with it. The game starts off with Link as a child in Kokiri Village. The Great Deku Tree is dying and summons him there, also bestowing upon him the fairy, Navi. After doing some preparations, you delve inside the tree. I generally assume most people watching this video are familiar with the Zelda formula that it helped establish, so I'll be light about the precise structure of the puzzles and really how you go through each dungeon, and focus more on how its implementation fits so perfectly with this game. But just to cover some bases, the game is made up of many dungeons that require you to solve puzzles, generally with some new item that opens up ways for you to navigate or collect items in a unique and different way. At the end of each dungeon is a boss, often with a mechanic that makes use of your latest power-up. Beat the boss and you get a special item that you need to progress in the story, and also power up with a heart container, making it so your maximum health increases. The Deku Tree is the first dungeon in this game, and it's not especially complicated, but does a great job of showing you some elements you need to be aware of, especially with Link's first foray into the third dimension. Things like momentum, gravity, platforming, spatial puzzles, and a variety of forms of traversing through the dungeon itself. I really like the Deku Tree as a dungeon. The puzzles aren't difficult, but do require you to pay attention, and the whole thing sets the tone for the game. After beating the boss and cleaning the corruption from the tree itself, it was still too late to save it, unfortunately. With its dying breaths, it explains what you must do and bestows upon you the Kokiri Emerald, telling you to find Princess Zelda in the Kingdom of Hyrule. On your way out of Kokiri Forest, you are stopped by your longtime friend, Saria. She's been your best friend your whole life, and one of the few people in Kokiri Village who always had your back. She gives you a parting gift, an ocarina. She doesn't teach you how to play it or anything. Link is also just very awkward and doesn't know how to deal with his emotions, so he just kind of runs away from her. That'll do it, bud. Hyrule Field feels fairly large for the N64, though by today's standards it's quite small. There are definitely some really fun elements to it though. For starters, the idea that there's a lens flare in a Nintendo 64 game is still astounding to me and kind of funny, but also the day-night cycle creates for a lot of exciting moments where it gets far more dangerous to run around at night. We'll wind up circumventing that pretty quickly though, but once you reach Hyrule's Castle Town, you can go straight to the castle itself, or you can mess around. There's a lot of messing around in this game, and oh man, messing around is fun. I do want to touch on the town here. It is bursting with life, with people running around, vibrant shops, and loads of little hidden things for you to do. I'm just saying, there's more to do in this town than in any other focal point of civilization in Breath of the Wild, that's for sure. People that have played this game know where I'm going with this, but just hold on to this imagery of how bright and alive the town is. We'll revisit this idea. Once you get to the castle, you meet a young girl named Malon, whose father owns a nearby ranch and is delivering milk. This is important information for two reasons. One, it's one of the funniest puzzles in the game. Two, you'll want to remember her. As for the puzzle, he fell asleep after making his delivery and you need to sneak into the castle, but her dad is blocking the side way in because he fell asleep. The solution here is to grab a chicken. Yes, I know they're called cuckoos. They're chickens. Shut up. And, well, deploy the chicken on top of him. Anywho, after that rude awakening, you sneak around a bunch of guards who all suck at their job and surprise Princess Zelda, except she already knows who you are. Shockingly, you look into the window and see the main antagonist meeting with her father. Ganondorf is an evil dude. Zelda knows he's evil. This could all be shut down right now, if only we had, maybe a really nice rock. But we don't. We've got Deku nuts. So yeah, between Zelda and her bodyguard, you learn you've got a whole bunch of stuff to do and need to set out to collect 2 more gems similar in nature to the Kokiri Emerald. They send you, a child, into an active volcano. How kind of them. At least they teach you how to actually play your ocarina, unlike Saria. What I'm trying to say here is that you have new friends now. Before heading to the volcano I mentioned, you really are just kind of free to go run around Hyrule, and I highly suggest you do. There's loads of fun little side things to discover, and while having a guide is nice if you're going for a completionist run, I'd really suggest just running around a whole lot. Yes, you'll backtrack a ton and you'll realize many things you can't actually do yet, but it's so fun to just explore this world, and when you do find something, it's super cool. There's so many songs for your ocarina you can learn throughout the game, but you only technically need a few of them. Just the idea of plummeting through graves to learn the sun song, which is how we circumvent that day-night cycle and don't fight zombies and skeletons all the time, or checking out the ranch and meeting Malon again to learn Epona's song is fantastic. Epona's a horse, and can provide a lot of optional but extremely helpful avenues for navigating the game's challenges, creating these less immediately obvious rewards for the player that just builds upon itself the further you get into the game, learning all of the ins and outs of its systems, making what can be a pretty linear adventure into something very open and personalized. But speaking of being linear, let's head over to that active volcano. I hope you like bombs, because that's all you're doing for a while. You do actually have to go see Saria again, as she's been hiding out in the Lost Woods, but the easiest way there is not actually through the Kokiri Forest. First, head to Kakariko Village, where I invite you to attack some chickens. Just take out your sword. Do it. Do it. And then do it some more. Even knowing what this does, I can't not do it the first time I get there, every time I play this game. But after going through the town and climbing up the mountain to reach Goron City, funnily enough, you're only staying there for a moment. You're going to light some bombs and bust a back door into the Lost Woods. One of the great things about the game is how interconnected everything is. Hyrule is a pretty large place, but it's all accessible with these little hidden shortcuts, and this isn't just a game design thing, it's intentional within the world design and lore. The idea of these different people working together despite all of their differences is ingrained into the rest of the story here, and this is one of the first real hints, among many, that we get at that. Everything you do in this game feels very thought through and intentional, especially when we get to the big gimmick of the story. Once you're in the woods, there's a specific path you have to take to get to Saria, who is hanging out in this hidden secret glade that is in front of the forest temple, which we cannot enter yet. But you'll find Saria there, and she finally remembers she didn't teach you how to play that ocarina. It's about time. So you'll head back to the Goron city and talk to the chieftain there, who is protecting their sacred jewel you need for your quest. He's really depressed and won't let you through, but if you play Saria's song, it's just such a banger, he can't help but dance, and you've cured his depression, giving you clearance into the dungeon to claim the jewel. I love the Goron, and this game is really what cemented it for me. In most fantasy settings, the tough mountain dudes are like really rugged and, they're mans, and they're aggressive and just kind of emotionless. But the Goron people and their city are filled with expressions of self and art, while also maintaining a close relationship with the earth and the natural state of their environment. It's always felt very different than any other mountain-dwelling fantasy race, and I love them for it. The dungeon is pretty fun. You do some cool stuff with bombs, of course, but, we can't hang out with our Goron friends forever, unfortunately, and need to go hang with the Zora. When you get to the Zora's Domain, it's a pretty cool place. Unlike some Zelda games, Link in this one can just swim forever. Diving is pretty limited at first though, but if you do this really fun and profitable mini-game where you dive for rupees, you can earn a special item that doubles your breath while diving, unlocking even more hidden paths throughout Hyrule. Seriously, you can get to pretty much anywhere from anywhere eventually, and it's like having modern fast travel, but way cooler. I very much prefer this, not only for its immersion, but also because of how it feels like it's continuing to reward me, like what I was talking about earlier with learning the Sun Song. Once you get past the preliminary puzzle of convincing the leader of the Zora to let you see their big fish friend, you feed it, and it eats you. The dungeon here is inside this enormous fish, and it's simultaneously the coolest and dumbest dungeon in this whole game. Like, you open doors by shooting basically uvulas. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with fish anatomy, but I don't think the structure of Lord Jabu Jabu here is very scientifically accurate. But this is a game, so it doesn't have to make sense. And you know what else doesn't make sense? This damn princess. She's inside the fish, and you have to rescue her to get the Zora Jewel. And she's the worst. Hey, come save me. No, absolutely do not save me. Okay, you can save me a little, but you have to carry me. I'm a fish person, and you can't drop me in the water, or else I respawn where I started. Make it make sense, people. I've played through this whole game something like 4 or 5 times now, and as I talked about, I don't really like using a guide for the game because of, and I'll expand on that, except for this dungeon, because I don't have the patience for this princess. Oh, and she's in love with me and wants to marry me or something. I don't know. Link is not good with women. So once you have all 3 jewels, you head back to Hyrule Castle to meet up with Princess Zelda at the Temple of Time. But you're too late. Ganondorf has made his move, and Zelda flees along with her bodyguard, but not before seeing you and throwing the Ocarina of Time into the moat. Ganondorf confronts you, and you realize just how intimidating this dude is. But ultimately, as evil as he is, he's too dumb to kill a little kid. Pick up the ocarina, head to the Temple of Time, and claim your destiny, the Master Sword. Except it's a trap. Ganondorf swung around to take you out and claims the Triforce for himself, although that splits apart and, thankfully he doesn't quite accomplish all of his goals yet. You're put into a stasis and wait 7 years until the time comes for you to be big and strong enough to properly wield the Master Sword, and you must save the day. In that time skip, Ganondorf has all but taken over Hyrule, but he hasn't achieved all of his goals yet. You can still stop him if you can gather all 7 sages and the medallions from each temple. So, off to adventure you go. Now the game has properly begun. I'm not going over every dungeon or anything, but I'm going to touch on some highlights. Before we get there, I want to contrast the adult Link world with the kid Link world. Remember that mental image of the bright and vibrant castle town? Yeah, I hope you held on to that, because you're gonna need it. All of the remaining people are zombies. The whole place is abandoned, and you can see remnants of the past scattered about. The downfall of the kingdom must have happened basically overnight. But not all of civilization fared quite so poorly. You can head to the ranch, which was taken over by a Ganondorf shill, but hey, the animals are doing alright. You can play Epona's song and challenge the owner there to a race and swindle him out of everything he owns. He so deserves it, that guy's a jerk. But really, we're needing to get back to the Forest Temple. To get in, you'll need to gain access to my favorite item in this game, the hookshot. I love the hookshot. It's so fun, with the huge amount of mobility it gives you while also being able to retrieve items. It's very flexible, kinda skillful, and just super great. But when you arrive at the forest, and the best character in this game, which is already filled with interesting, fun characters, appears. You'll run into Sheik across basically all of the temples, guiding you on your journey, and they are clearly extremely powerful, but it's not apparent where they come from or how they know so much about your struggles. We later learn, and here's a major spoiler for a 26-year-old game, that they are actually Princess Zelda in disguise, which is still such a great twist and one of the highlights of the game. Once you're in the Forest Temple, you'll see that these dungeons are far more involved than the earlier ones in the game. They're bigger, they're harder, they're longer, and dare I say, they're better. I love each one of the temples, and they're all very different from one another. Aesthetically, the Forest Temple is my favorite, though the Spirit Temple is probably the best dungeon overall of the game. But many of the puzzles have multi-step solutions. They require tons of keys that you'll find from solving other, smaller puzzles throughout the temple, while enemies and environmental dangers provide a much larger threat than most things you would run into so far. My favorite boss in the whole game, actually, is the one at the end of the Forest Temple, but unfortunately, I had already spent way more time on Ocarina than I had intended to, and needed to move on for the production schedule of the channel before I could quite get there. I do want to talk about it though. Phantom Ganon has you fighting a spirit of Ganondorf as it jumps through enchanted paintings, riding on a horse, and basically doing almost like Headless Horseman stuff, except he's got a head. And if that's not cool, I don't know what is. The other temples all have things you'll need to do before you gain access to them, similar to how you needed the hookshot to get inside the Forest Temple, but most of them are rooted in more one-dimensional gear. You can shed your green tunic for a red one to withstand the intense heat of Mount Doom for the Fire Temple, or the blue tunic gives you the ability to breathe underwater, which is especially great when combined with the iron boots, allowing you to sink to the bottom of any water area and walk on the floor. This is both great for exploration, but also many puzzles. All of these things were introduced in this game and have become mainstays in future games, like many of the mechanics of Ocarina of Time. But most of those games put them in because they were popular here, where they were created in Ocarina because they had great ideas that these were the solution. I feel like I had more fun with these items the first time around because they weren't shoehorned in, but rather the game was made for them. And that's true of many things in Ocarina of Time. There's a reason this game established the formula that so many people associate with Zelda, and it's not because they set out to make one. The game drip feeds the progress in a way that empowers the player and creates a compounding interest of sorts for rewards that stack on top of one another, encouraging constant exploration and trial and error that more often than not proves at least fun, even when it doesn't yield tangible benefits. Of course, I can't talk about Ocarina of Time without expanding on the time idea. After clearing the Forest Temple, you can return to the Temple of Time and place the Master Sword back in its pedestal to travel back in time to when Link is a child. Several of the puzzles and things you need to accomplish as an adult are built upon things that you set up as a kid, so in order to set any of that up, you'll need to go back and forth between the two. This is one of the main reasons I suggested not looking up a guide for the game, because if you just get most things done the first go around, you don't get to see as many of the influences of your actions throughout the timeline, which is one of the most rewarding parts of exploring through all of the nuance here, which is truly remarkable. For example, a lot of the items you can use as a kid don't work as an adult. A lot of the items you use as an adult don't work as a kid. Some of that is just the mechanical stuff, hand wave game logic away, but a lot of that is because, like for example, the Hylian shield is this big heavy metal shield, and Kid Link literally just doesn't have the muscle mass to use it properly. So when Kid Link has the Hylian shield, they don't hold it up like a shield. They just wear it on their back and can like crouch over so that actually protects them. You need that for getting to the Great Fairy Fountain on Mount Doom. So there's these rocks that are falling, and when they're going to fall on you, you just crouch and you protect yourself and you're fine, because that shield is apparently like, I don't know, Captain America's shield or something, and it disperses the energy and you should have been crushed anyways, but hey, games physics. But really, it is time to wrap things up. I cannot finish talking about this game without talking about its legacy. Ocarina of Time is a touchstone moment in gaming, creating the reference point for 3D adventure games that the industry still looks at and builds upon today. The less mechanical aspects of the game, like the art direction and music, are still some of the greatest in any game ever made. While the music is certainly referential to previous titles in some parts, some are really just new here, but then get utilized in many games thereafter in the franchise. Things like the Temple of Time have become absolutely iconic, both in the visual design but also the music. Saria's song is in a ton of games, along with Zelda's Lullaby. The Song of Storms, don't get me started, but by far the best music in this game is Gerudo Valley. Frickin' love that place. Ocarina of Time is astounding at every single thing it does, and I think has the most complete and interesting narrative of any Zelda game, while also establishing every single thing that makes any 3D title in the franchise feel unique amongst a large field of competitors. And you know the craziest thing about how good this game is? It wasn't even the best thing to come out in the fourth quarter of 1998. Join me tomorrow as I talk about my 40th favorite game, where I play my favorite title in a different Nintendo franchise.